Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news. You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
Let's get back to the Supreme Court decision. We've been waiting a number of rulings. We got one this morning. The Supreme Court upholds curbs on treatment for transgender minor. June Grasso joins us here. She's a legal analyst at Bloomberg News here. June, I know it's a big court case here. What did the court find?
So this is basically expected from what we heard during the oral arguments. And the court found that this Tennessee law that bans gender-affirming care for minors doesn't violate the Equal Protection Clause. And the key is the method of analyzing it. So it could be analyzed, these laws can be analyzed under a rational basis test or under a strict scrutiny test. The rational basis test is much easier. You just have to show that there's a rational connection between the government's interests and the law. And that's what the Fifth Circuit did in this case. And then they found that the law didn't violate the Equal Protection Clause. With the strict scrutiny test, which is what the trial court used, you have to show that there's a compelling government interest in having this law and that it's narrowly tailored. So here the Supreme Court said we don't have to use the strict scrutiny test, we're going to use the rational basis test. And under that law, under that kind of analysis, this law passes. And that's, as I said, the rational basis is a pretty easy test. Justice, during the oral arguments, there were a lot of questions, and a lot of the conservatives talked about how this was not a question for the court, this was a question for the lawmakers, and the lawmakers had decided this. And so the Chief Justice, in his opinion, in the last sentence, referred to that. He said, hold on, I'm looking for it. It's 118 pages. I don't know if I'll be able to find it at this point. He said that this case carries with it the weight of fierce scientific and policy debates about the safety, efficacy, and propriety of medical treatments. And so by the court's role is just to determine whether it violates the Equal Protection Clause. So we're leaving policy to the people, their elected representatives, and the democratic process. Justice Sotomayor wrote the dissent, and she was very heartfelt and concerned during the oral arguments about the fact that transgender people are about 1% of the population, and so the lawmakers who are making these laws, she said, are not considering them. They have no input, really.
They have no voice.
They have no voice.
So what law does this then leave in place?
So it leaves in place the Kentucky ban on gender-affirming care for minors, which other states have copied. And so,
but in reality, what does that mean? So if you're under 18, you're not allowed to take steps to change genders?
Right, exactly.
To transition, I should say?
It's a little bit of a complicated law, but under any kind of gender-affirming care or affirming care for gender dysphoria is not allowed if you're under 18. So that even includes if your, parents are on board with it. So it eliminates a lot of the treatments that are out there.
What are we still waiting from the Supreme Court on, June?
So we're still waiting for the birthright citizenship case, which is, by the way, not going to rule on whether the birthright citizenship executive order that Trump put forth is legal or not. It's going to rule on another issue about nationwide injunctions. And we're waiting on the age verification for porn websites from Texas. And let me see. We're also waiting on, I have a list here of the TransCare. That was a big one that we were waiting for. The FCC's Universal Service Fund.
All right, so there's still a couple more things we're waiting for. All right, excellent stuff. June Grasso, thank you so much for joining us. June Grasso, on short notice on these Supreme Court cases, our legal analyst here for Bloomberg News.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
Alix here alongside Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. We bring you all the top news in business, economics, and finance through our lens of our Bloomberg Intelligence folks. They cover 2,000 companies in 130 industries all around the world. We are also following what is happening around the world. President Donald Trump declining to say October that the U.S. plans to join Israel's military offensive on Iran, but had some pretty harsh words for Iran and what he thought unconditional surrender meant, which was he's had it. That's what he said. Quote, I've had it. Daniel Byman is director of the Warfare, Irregular Threats, and Terrorism Program at the Center of Strategic and International Studies and a professor at Georgetown University. Professor, what do you take that to mean? Unconditional surrender means I've had it. What is that?
It's unclear exactly what President Trump is looking for when it comes to Iran. Obviously, he was trying negotiations and was frustrated by Iran's unwillingness to accept the U.S. offer. But what he actually hopes to accomplish through military threats or perhaps military action, he still has not made clear.
What do you think the options are for the U.S. in its role potentially in that part of the world today?
So the United States could continue variations of what it's doing right now, which is aid to Israel, but on the relatively light side. So the U.S. is already assisting with air defense. There are news reports the U.S. has assisted with intelligence on Iran and helping resupply Israel as it runs out of important munitions could be one role, basically continuing what the U.S. is doing. But it could also step up pressure in lots of ways. One of the ones being most discussed is using the U.S. ordnance that is massive and specifically designed to go after sites that are deeply buried. And Iran's key nuclear site, Fordo, is literally inside a mountain. So joining that and using the assets that really only the United States has to go after this, and in so doing, probably further devastating Iran's nuclear program. And it could be even more ambitious than that. Israel has attacked Iranian infrastructure and especially a range of military and energy targets. And if the United States joined in that, the goal might be to severely weaken the regime for several years and perhaps even try to lay the groundwork for regime change, although that's probably a bridge too far.
Yesterday on television, I was speaking with retired General Wesley Clark. He's a retired U.S. Army officer. He also was head of NATO, the supreme allied leader of NATO for the West. And I wonder, and he was pointing out the three things that happen when you're in the Situation Room, sort of the means, the ends, and he said something else, the hows, I think it is, and it's how you do it, the means with which you do it, and then what the end goal is. What is your level of confidence that those three things are being given equal treatment right now?
So let me say two things that may seem to contradict, but I think they're both true. One is the U.S. has been preparing for this operation for decades. This is something that has been discussed over the years by different administrations, and there's tremendous knowledge in the military and intelligence community on how to target Iran. And so there's a lot of ability to kind of do this reasonably well from a tactical sense. But there are a lot of chaotic factors that are also in play here. And one of the biggest is simply what the United States is hoping to achieve from all this. Is it simply bandwagoning on what Israel is already doing? Does it have different goals? And it's unclear to me how the process is working in terms of who is giving the president advice, how serious those people are in terms of what they've thought through, and whether they've thought about some of the long-term consequences that are political as well as military.
Do we have any sense, Daniel, how the Iranians will respond if the Americans were to aid the Israelis with some offensive operations?
So it's possible that the Iranians will recognize the overwhelming might of American military forces and simply try to limit any retaliation, recognizing that they're going to receive a lot worse than they're going to give. And the best they can hope for is just to hunker down. But no country likes to, frankly, be bombed or take a beating and do nothing about it. And they'll have strong political reasons to try to respond. A lot could be in the Middle East. Iran has a strong presence in terms of paramilitary ties and proxy groups in Iraq in particular, but also other states. And they'll go after U.S. forces stationed there. They'll go after U.S. personnel there. In the past, Iran has also supported international terrorism, and it has attacked targets around the world. So these are definite possibilities. And then we have to accept that Iran is creative and might do things we don't anticipate, that there are things that may be in its playbook that we just don't know about.
This is an extremely unfair question. Is there a better way to go around this? Like, no one thinks that a nuclear Iran is good. Everyone doesn't want that, hands down. What is a better way if we're not going to get drawn into this at a military level and negotiations aren't working? Is there a third rail?
So when we have negotiations backed by the threat of military force, they're more likely to succeed. And Iran was moving towards some degree of acceptance of negotiations. It's just a question of what level of success the United States was willing to have with negotiations. Having something similar to the Iran deal that President Obama signed, which basically froze Iran's program, that was definitely in the realm of the possible and I think could be in the future. But Iran was drawing the line in terms of having some nuclear program. It said we are not going to give it up completely, even if it's not a nuclear weapons program. Iran was also drawing the line when it comes to support like proxy groups. So it's really a question of whether the United States will accept limits on a deal, risk in other areas, or if it wants a much more absolute solution.
Daniel, real quickly, 30 seconds left. Does the U.S. have the military assets in place now, or do we need a few days and or weeks?
So we have some in place now that can do a lot of damage to Iran. We also have long-range strike capabilities. So we have aircraft that can fly from thousands of miles away, refuel in flight, and do a lot of damage. But having another carrier in the area certainly would help.
Daniel, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Daniel Byman, Director of Warfare, Irregular Threats, and Terrorism Program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, laying out the options for the U.S. As we heard from President Trump earlier today on the South Lawn, as you said, as you quoted him, he's had it. So I'm not sure what that means, but it feels like a decision will be coming from the U.S. side, maybe sooner rather than later.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
Something is confirmed when it comes to Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel. I'm still trying to understand if it's a takeover, if it's a partnership, if it's a golden relationship. I really couldn't tell you, but you know who can? Joe Deaux. He's an economic statecraft reporter. He's also covered the steel industry for many, many years. Joe, what kind of deal is this?
Well, I mean, this is a takeover.
It's a straight up takeover.
So the decks just hit, and I had a chance to look through them right before I got here. It's a $14.1 billion deal, which is what was agreed to in December of 2023, and an additional $11 billion in investments across the footprint of U.S. Steel. Now, here's the key thing. There's a golden share, and what is now confirmed that I think could be considered by some troubling, but also a hurdle for many who are investors in Nippon Steel. The golden share gives the President of the United States in perpetuity decision-making abilities over a number of company-specific decisions that every company on planet Earth has to make over periods of time. Capital investments, decisions to lay off workers, decisions to cut capacity. And then there's some basic ones like a decision whether or not they want to move the headquarters and change the name.
I've never heard of a golden share type of mechanism. Have they been used? Has this been used before?
Golden shares are not unusual outside of the United States. We see this in Europe. We do see this across Asia. But the United States takes a bit of pride in the fact that it doesn't do golden shares. Now, initially, Josh Wingrove and I, one of our White House reporters, had been reporting in this golden share, and the initial reporting we were getting was that, well, the golden share isn't exactly a golden share, it's more just some veto powers. But what has become clear is the golden share gives specific power to the President of the United States. There's all sorts of questions that I have there that I don't know if we can get into right now, but I do think these are the questions that investors in Nippon Steel are going to have to be asking themselves.
Okay, here's the dumb one. Why did Nippon Steel go for this? Like, why spend $14 billion to have your investment in the U.S. run by the President of the United States?
I think it shows how much Nippon Steel needed this expansion. The idea was if Nippon Steel didn't close the U.S. Steel deal, they would have to pivot. And the pivot discussions among investors and analysts who've covered this company for years said, well, maybe they're going to build out more steel capacity in India. India is actually their biggest footprint in terms of production, not Japan. But it still left them without a foothold in the United States and North America. And mind you, that is arguably the most important steel market in the world. The automotive market in the United States is unbelievably important for steelmakers. It is a crown jewel. If you are ArcelorMittal, if you are any Chinese company, you wish you could be selling steel into the automotive industry. The margins on that steel are incredible, and the customers are solid gold. You know that they're going to be taking shipments year in and year out. The deals that they make with these guys are 3-year contracts. It's not just ad hoc. So Nippon Steel now, they spent a lot. They put a lot into it, but I think it said how much the executives at Nippon Steel believed that the future of Nippon Steel relied on getting this deal.
Wow.
Was this deal subject to shareholder approval?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the Nippon shareholders...
Okay. The merger agreement was signed and agreed to back in April of 2024 by all the shareholders. The national security agreement that was signed with the $11 billion investment before 2028 was not subject to that same shareholder approval.
So this golden share did not come up for shareholder vote.
Right. Not a direct vote.
Interesting.
And there's a lot to unpack around that. I mean, to some, this deal's done. The Arbs are probably going to be celebrating having a few beers or enjoying their wife and kids for the first time in a year and a half.
Yeah.
But for those of us who are in the steel market and follow the steel market, it is going to be interesting how the landscape morphs around all of these decisions.
Right. So what is the biggest thing then that you're watching for the trickle down of this kind of deal?
I want to see how Nippon Steel jumps into the market. Are they going to start selling at below market prices to gain market share? There is an argument to be made that the doubling of steel tariffs that we saw President of the United States announce in Pittsburgh 3 weeks ago when he announced the deal is actually because the administration understands that by Nippon Steel getting this deal closed, they are a formidable opponent to Nucor Corporation, which is the largest U.S. steelmaker, and Steel Dynamics and Cliffs. But that also means you're bringing in a very viable opponent who can continue to produce and increase their production in their capacity. That would hurt prices technically. By putting in a higher tariff, this 50% tariff, you are on some level closing out most foreign imports, and therefore you're putting a floor on prices. That will be interesting to see how it plays out. We're already in a tough situation in the steel market right now. It's a cyclical moment. Obviously, the entire trade tariff situation going on is problematic even in the steel industry. I think that's the first thing we're really going to have to focus on.
All right. Joe, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Joe Deaux, Bloomberg Metals and Mining reporter.
No, Economic Statecraft Reporter.
Economic Statecraft Reporter.
He just moved. It's a totally new section within Bloomberg to talk about metals and mining and all the risks that come with it and the economics with it.
Exactly.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
June is Pride Month, so over the next couple weeks, we're going to highlight segments that on topics related to equality. And today we decided to speak to Kevin Tilsy, founder and CEO of GEO Academies. The organization's focused on helping to break the cycle of poverty through access to education. Super pressing topic right now. Hey, Kevin, can you walk us through specifically what your company does?
Okay, thanks for having me. GEO stands for Greater Education Opportunities Foundation. And what we do is we're a nonprofit, and we support and manage and start public open enrollment charter schools in the country. We're in Louisiana and Indiana right now and headed to Ohio.
Talk to us about or describe one of your schools, like what grade levels and kind of what's the focus?
What we're most known for, first of all, we're kindergarten through 12th grade, but we take a very business-like approach to what we do in the sense that we believe in spending the money most effectively and efficiently for each student's needs. And there's nothing in the law anywhere in the country that says all you can get with K-12 dollars is a K-12 education. So we're best known for students graduating from our high school with a full associate degree. That's 2 years of college that's already paid for by us, earned by them. We're also, I believe, the only network in the country where students have actually graduated having earned a full bachelor's degree before graduating from high school.
How does school choice benefit the U.S. workforce, and how does that align to the DOE?
Well, I think we're completely aligned with the current U.S. Department of Education's goals of preparing students for to be successful citizens in the community. When I use the term college, that's a universal umbrella name that I put for both college and career. And what we're trying to do is get our students to graduate not only from high school, and not just to go to college, but to complete college. And to say that we have a problem in the United States is a bit of an understatement when it comes to college completion. And it's not necessarily because of lack of money. The U.S. Department of Education's biggest job is to loan money for kids to go to college. So they do student loans. You've probably been following the student loan forgiveness program under the previous administration. The reality is the U.S. Department of Education, and frankly all the states across the country, have either Pell Grants or loans or college scholarship programs. And in most cases, they're a failure. We have students borrowing money or getting money who have absolutely no college experience whatsoever. And so does that make any sense? If you're an employer and you're hiring somebody to come take a job, the very first thing an employer is going to ask is, what's your experience? But when it comes to college loans or grants, Pell Grants, FAFSA, which you've probably heard of, the Federal Student Loan Program, even state grant programs, there's no question on there that asks, what's your college experience? And you may say, well, these are high school kids. Why should they have college experience? Well, many schools across the country are doing dual credit and dual enrollment now. So if you know that you're going to need a grant or a loan by the time you graduate from high school, maybe you ought to be getting some of that college experience while you're in high school. And then the loan and grant folks, or the officers that are reviewing the opportunity, they would have a question there that says, do you have any college experience?
Right.
How did you do? So that when they're borrowing that money, the borrower knows what they're getting into. Makes sense to me.
Yeah. Kevin, what's the economic model for GEO academies?
We try not to rely on philanthropy. We focus 100% on using the public tax dollar, the federal and local and state dollars that every traditional public school gets. And we just try to get as much education as possible for each of our students. We do need philanthropy to start the school, but after we get it up and running, we are self-sustaining.
Really great stuff. Good luck. Really appreciate it. What actually is your biggest hurdle right now before we let you go?
I think the biggest hurdle is getting adults to understand that when we get kids that graduate with an associate degree or bachelor's degree, that is a great start to their career and their lives, and it benefits all of us. Believe it or not, there are some adults out there that think kids in high school should enjoy high school. Well, in many cases, that's okay. But in the student population that I'm serving, which is Gary, Indiana, Indianapolis, and Baton Rouge, very low-income communities, these kids are ready to rock and get going. They don't have time to sit around and enjoy the traditional high school.
Right.
They want to get busy with their life. They want to get moving and earning an income and, being successful.
All right. Really great story. Thank you so much, Kevin Tilsy. We wish you all the luck for that in all your endeavors. He is the founder and CEO of GEO Academics.
Yep. This is the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live each weekday, 10 a.m. to noon Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.